All right, so we're looking at the Q1 3-point rubric. Now remember, it starts off with our row A thesis. This is out of 1 point. Okay? You get 0 points if you don't have a defensible thesis. If you only restate the prompt, you should be using the language of the prompt, but you should not just restate it. You should use it to prove something. And if it provides a summary of the issue with no apparent or coherent claim, you have to be making some kind of interpretation of the literature. That's your claim. Or if it doesn't respond to the prompt. But you do earn a point if you respond to the prompt as a thesis that presents a defensible interpretation of the poem. Now, your interpretation of the poem needs to go along with whatever the prompt is. When we look at our 2 samples today, we'll look at what they're asking about, and then your interpretation based on what they're asking about is how you create your thesis. That's your claim. Okay? So that's thesis. Questions? All right. Next, where'd it go? There it is. We have row B with evidence and commentary. Notice capital and. You have out of 4 points. To get 4 points, you need to provide specific evidence in support of all claims in a line of reasoning. So you are taking chunks out of that poem to support your argument. Right? You're not just throwing down quotes. Like, have you ever seen people throw down quotes like little speed bumps, where they just throw quotes in an essay? You've seen people do that. And you're like, okay, why did you use that quote that isn't necessary? You have to use quotes that are supporting your ideas. And you are consistently explaining how the evidence supports a line of reasoning. You don't ever put any evidence in, quotes or paraphrase, without tying it back to whatever your thesis is. You always constantly go back and back and back. And you need to explain how multiple literary elements or techniques in the poem contribute to its meaning. Now, when we're talking about literary elements and techniques, that's where we get into those poetry terms that I had you look at, right? You can get as nitty-gritty and down to business as end rhyme, which is super specific, right? Or you can do things that are a little more open-ended, like figurative language, which encompasses similes, metaphors, personification, right? You can talk about symbolism, point of view. There's a lot of different things that you can talk about when we're talking about literary techniques. You don't have to get super nitpicky, but you do have to mention that it's there. Characterization. And so that's your 4. When you look at how it goes down, it essentially is just lesser degrees of whatever this 4 is, right? The difference between a 4 and a 3 is really the commentary and the explaining, because it does this to less of a degree. So maybe you're picking a lot of good quotes, but you're not explaining it as well, and that's where you get further with the 3. For the 2, you have some evidence, and then you don't really have a lot of commentary or tying it into the literary devices. For 1, you have some evidence, but it's general, and you just summarize what the evidence is saying. This is where I see people end up a lot, because you just tell me what the evidence is saying. You don't tell me why it's important, okay? And then a 0 would just restate what happens in the poem, or just restate the thesis. Questions about your second category, evidence and analysis, or evidence and commentary? All right. Your third is sophistication. 0 does not meet the criteria. Here's the criteria. You demonstrate sophistication or thought and or develop a complex literary argument. So, this is what you're looking to do. You are identifying and exploring complexities or tensions within the poem. You can do any of these. You can illuminate the student's interpretation by situating it within a broader context. That's where you're tying lit into the world. Remember, lit is life. I did that all at You are accounting for alternative interpretations of the poem. That's where you are essentially turning it into a little more of an argument, where you're saying, you know, like, while some people may interpret, you know, the water as a drowning, it is more of a baptism. And then you're tying it into like that like deep thought. And then finally, you are employing a style that is consistently vivid and persuasive. This is where the style comes in. So you don't have to do all of these, but you can really, doing any of the following will get you that sophistication point. That's hard to do. All right? Like, I'm not expecting tons of this. But where we can definitely make up our points is our first two categories. All right, questions? Now, just as a reminder, these, I think, are really similar across the different categories of essays that you're writing. And so, just keep in mind, you need a thesis that is on topic and defensible. You need evidence and analysis that backs it up and explain how it backs it up. And then try and throw in some style, lit is life, bigger ideas. For your sophistication, while you are saying that lit is life, just a warning, you do not bring in other pieces to try and compare them. You know what I mean? Like, you may make a reference, but like, you don't, like, I had somebody once do a poem and then pull in a different poem that we had done before and compare it to that poem, like, extensively. Like, it's not a comparison, you know what I mean? It's just like a building upon. We good? Ready for your poem?
Yeah, no.